You've probably heard stories about bad customer service, but nothing could prepare you for what happened on this flight. A young woman, excited to be heading to her dream vacation, boarding a plane, ready for her adventure. But what happens next will leave you questioning everything. A flight crew's laughter, a disabled passenger who was left humiliated, and an ending that no one saw coming. Her name was Lily Johnson. She wasn't someone with a large following or a famous face, but she was someone with a heart full of dreams. Lily had been born with a disability, something she carried with pride. It wasn't always easy, but she learned to live her life on her terms. That day, she was traveling to a small beach town to take her first solo trip. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, a much-needed break from the stress of her everyday life. She couldn't wait to feel the sand beneath her feet and the sea breeze on her face. Lily had arranged everything weeks in advance: hotel bookings, car rentals, and of course, the flight. She was excited but nervous. As someone who relied on a wheelchair, she knew how people sometimes treated her differently, but she had learned to brush it off. It didn't matter what other people thought. She was going to enjoy her vacation. The flight started like any other. Passengers were boarding, the crew was doing their usual checks, and Lily was settled in her seat, making sure her wheelchair was properly secured. But then, something happened that she never could have expected. As the crew made their rounds, one of the flight attendants, Carla, glanced over at Lily and sneered. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a glance. But then, Carla nudged her colleague and whispered something. Lily tried to ignore it, focusing on her book, but the whispering didn't stop. It wasn't long before Carla started laughing, loud enough for others to hear. And then, just like that, the entire crew joined in. Lily's heart sank. She had experienced judgment before, but this felt different. They were mocking her, laughing at her because of her disability. Lily was stunned of what to do. She had faced cruel treatment before, but this was something else entirely. She looked around, hoping someone would stand up, but the other passengers were just as silent as the crew. There were no words of support, no one to defend her. It felt as though she was invisible, just a joke to everyone around her. But then, something happened that she didn't expect. The pilot, Captain Robert Harris, who had been standing near the cockpit, overheard the laughter. He wasn't the type to let things slide, especially when it came to treating people with respect. He quickly made his way to the front of the cabin and stopped in front of the flight attendants. His presence was enough to make them fall silent. The atmosphere shifted. The laughter stopped. Carla looked up at Captain Harris, but instead of getting a reprimand, she got something else entirely. Captain Harris didn't yell, but his voice was firm. "I overheard what just happened," he said, his tone calm, but unmistakably serious. "That kind of behavior is not acceptable on this plane, and it won't be tolerated. You will treat every passenger with respect, no matter who they are." Lily, who had been holding back tears, couldn't believe her ears. For the first time since she'd boarded the plane, she felt seen, like someone finally understood what she had been going through. But just when she thought the worst was over, Carla's eyes narrowed, and she muttered something under her breath. It was subtle, almost too quiet to hear, but it was clear enough. "Who does he think he is?" The tension was thick in the air. Captain Harris gave her one last look before turning away and heading back to the cockpit. The rest of the flight proceeded without incident, but Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. There was more to this story, and what was happening now was only the beginning. As the plane neared its destination, Lily's phone buzzed. It was a message from her best friend Amelia, asking if she had made it safely. But Lily was distracted. Her thoughts were racing. She was still processing what had just happened. She wanted to brush it off, but the sting of being laughed at, of being treated like she didn't belong, was hard to ignore. She didn't ask for special treatment. She just wanted to be treated like everyone else. The plane touched down, and the fasten seatbelt sign went off. As passengers began to file out, Lily stayed in her seat for a moment, contemplating what had just unfolded. But then, something unexpected happened. Carla approached her again. This time, her demeanor was completely different. She was stiff, nervous even, like she wasn't sure what to say or do. "I'm sorry for earlier," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But the apology wasn't sincere. It was just a formality, something to get the situation to go away. Lily didn't know what to say. She had heard enough fake apologies in her life to recognize one when she heard it. But what Carla didn't know was that Lily wasn't the type to let things slide anymore. This wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever been treated poorly, everyone who had ever been made to feel less than. And Lily wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not ever. As she stood up to leave the plane, she made a decision. She wasn't just going to walk off and forget. She was going to make sure that the way she was treated was known. Not for revenge, but for the simple fact that she deserved respect, just like everyone else. Lily walked down the jetway, her heart still racing from the confrontation on the plane. It wasn't just the humiliation that stung. It was the realization that this was something so many people experienced, day in and day out. She wasn't the only one who had been laughed at, belittled, or made to feel invisible. But this time, things were different. Lily was going to make sure that what had happened to her didn't go unnoticed. She had been through a lot in her life. Years of school where the kids made fun of her, family members who didn't understand her struggles, and even some doctors who spoke to her like she didn't have a voice. She had learned to keep her head down, to smile and nod, to accept the way things were. But today, something had shifted inside her. Today, she wasn't going to stay quiet. Lily made her way to the airport's customer service desk, her hands shaking slightly. She didn't know exactly what she was going to do, but she knew she had to take action. She couldn't let Carla's behavior slide. She couldn't let the flight crew's laughter be brushed off as just a joke. Not this time. When she reached the counter, she saw the familiar face of an airline employee. The woman behind the desk smiled at her. But Lily could barely force herself to smile back. She explained everything that had happened on the flight. How the crew had laughed at her because of her disability. How it felt like she didn't matter. How they had mocked her when all she wanted was to get to her destination in peace. The employee listened attentively, her face going from neutral to concerned as Lily spoke. After a long pause, she nodded and promised to look into the matter. But as Lily turned to leave, she felt a small sense of relief. She had done what she could. She had spoken up. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't alone in this. But as she walked toward the exit of the airport, her phone buzzed again. It was a text from Amelia, asking how things were going. Lily's thumbs hovered over the screen as she started typing back. She wanted to tell her everything, but there was so much to process. Instead, she just wrote, "I'll be okay. Just need a minute." The airport felt quieter than it should have. People were rushing to catch their flights, moving about in a blur, but all Lily could focus on was the sting of what had happened. But then, something unexpected occurred. A woman, a complete stranger, approached her. She was holding a coffee cup in one hand and a purse in the other. But it was her smile that stopped Lily in her tracks. The woman introduced herself as Tanya, and when Lily explained why she was still so shaken, Tanya nodded, almost as if she understood exactly what Lily was going through. "I overheard what happened," Tanya said quietly, "and I just wanted to say, thank you. Thank you for speaking up. People like you make the world a better place." Lily was stunned. Here was a complete stranger telling her she was doing the right thing. For a brief moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The world wasn't full of people who would laugh at her or make her feel small. There were others who cared, who would stand with her, even if they didn't know her. And that made all the difference. As the days passed, Lily's story started to spread. The incident on the plane didn't just fade away. People started talking about it. On social media, in news articles, and even in online forums where disabled individuals shared their experiences. The airline at first seemed to hope it would disappear, but soon the company's customer service team reached out to Lily. They apologized for the flight crew's behavior and assured her that they were taking action. But what happened next shocked her. The airline didn't just apologize and move on. They took responsibility. They issued a public statement condemning the actions of the flight crew, and within days, Carla had been removed from her position. The airline also announced that they were implementing new training programs for all staff to ensure that something like this never happened again. Lily couldn't believe what she was hearing. It wasn't just an apology. It was real change, and it was all because she had spoken up. What had started as an embarrassing and painful moment for her had turned into something bigger than she could have imagined. She had made a difference, but the real turning point came when Lily received a message from Captain Robert Harris, the pilot who had stood up for her on the plane. He thanked her for her courage and said that he had been moved by her strength. He told her that it wasn't just about what happened that day. It was about sending a message that no one, no matter their circumstances, should ever be treated with disrespect. Lily's heart swelled with gratitude. She hadn't expected any of this. All she wanted was to feel like she belonged, to feel like she wasn't just a target for someone else's cruel humor. But now, as she sat on the beach a few days later, feeling the warm sun on her face, she realized something powerful. The world may not always be kind, but if you stand your ground, you can make it kinder. The vacation she had once thought of as just an escape turned into a symbol of her strength. The moment she stood up for herself had changed everything. And though the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, she now knew that she didn't have to face them alone. She had the power to stand tall. And for everyone who had ever been made to feel small, her fight was their fight too. Sometimes, it only takes one voice to start a ripple. And one day, that ripple will become a wave of change, understanding, and kindness that reaches far beyond what anyone could ever imagine.